Again, I'm welcoming everyone to this program on democracy and the impact of journalism. Anybody sitting in the back row who would like to get lunch and hasn't ordered yet, please just flag down the waitress as she comes back to place your order. I also would like to acknowledge Nancy Lilquist, who's on Ellensburg City Council. Nancy, you want to wave your thank you for attending. Once again, our speakers for today are Donna Etchey and Joanna Markell, and we'll start with Joanna. And this meeting is being recorded, so if you could keep the ambient noise down, that would be lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. I know a good number of people in this room, so I'm glad to see those familiar faces. I'm the managing editor in Yakima. I've been at the Yakima Herald for 6 years, and before that I was here at the Ellensburg Daily Record, so I spent 8 years here in Ellensburg, and my mom is here. She still lives here, so say hi to her. So I'm still back in Ellensburg quite a bit too when I can. I'm going to start with the first slide, and I'm going to just mention and start with this, that the League of Women Voters in Washington State did a survey on the state of the newspaper industry several years ago. Are people in this room familiar with that study? If you are not, it is definitely worth looking up. And at that point it talks about the pressures facing the newspaper industry in the state, and laid out some of the challenges, specifically the challenge of news deserts, which are areas that do not have a local newspaper. Those areas have been growing in the country, and I don't think this would come as a surprise. So more than a fifth of the nation's citizens live in news deserts right now, with very limited access to a local news source. So that should not be a surprise. I would say that the trends that were laid out in that survey a couple of years ago have not changed, and if anything, they're getting worse in terms of advertising pressure, decreasing advertising, and just the way people have changed in their consumption of news. So it's a very hard issue to tackle in terms of the digital advertising just isn't, you don't get as much money from digital advertising as you do from print advertising. And it costs a lot of money to distribute a print newspaper and get it delivered to people's households. Yakima and Ellensburg are both mail delivery now. Yakima switched in the past 6 months. It has changed our deadlines. So those pressures are still there, and we are being as creative as possible to continue meeting our mission of serving the community with news while still kind of dealing with the financial pressures. So I'm not going to dwell on that. I'm going to try to talk about some of the good things that are happening. But I wanted to start, before I move on, I wanted to start with just throwing up this next slide. So this was a study that was done in 2022 with the University of Texas, Austin. And as people who are now familiar with that study, I just want to throw this information up there. So people who live in news deserts, according to this study, do not think that they live in news deserts. So go to the next slide. So 46% of the people who were surveyed don't believe that their communities are news deserts. And that is because they're still getting local information about their communities. And these may be smaller communities where people are pretty connected, but they have access to local Facebook pages, and community groups are putting out information. You're getting information from your Chamber of Commerce. You're getting information from the police department when something happens, and they are finding content that meets the critical information needs and helps people build community. And the study also found that there wasn't a lot of misinformation there either. I mean, I can point to some examples of misinformation in some of those community groups, but it's not common. So I just want to throw that out to the room. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Do you think that's happening here?
Yes.
I think we all do it. I think we all rely on some of that information we get from Facebook. through our community groups and through what we're getting from government agencies. So that raises the question of that survey that the league did. So you know, what do we do? What do we do with that? And as somebody who's in the news media, that obviously makes me concerned, but I can also illustrate why we are still important. So next slide.
Can you move in just a teeny bit? Yeah, that's great.
So journalism is good for democracy. I can tell you that. Erosion in local news is tied to a drop in civic engagement. Reading a newspaper motivates people to vote. Shrinking news coverage is tied to less competition in political races. And this is from a different survey, this last point, but local news coverage reduces corruption in local government, and it keeps taxes lower. And I can point to a couple examples in the lower Yakima Valley where this last point has become very critical that there was news coverage. I can point to the city of Wapato, which a few years ago had some issues with its government and there was some corruption. And then recently we've done a significant amount of reporting on the Toppenish School District and some recent audit reports that came out there. So how do we sustain this and how do we keep this going? And the next slide is newspaper subscriptions. It's people subscribing to the newspaper and advertising with us. So an example of some stories that we've done lately that required a lot of time and effort and require a reporter on the ground who really can dig into the issues. We've done significant reporting in Yakima about some of our trailer parks, lower income housing. There's a company called Hearst & Sons in the state that's been buying up mobile home parks and raising people's rates. It's put a lot of pressure on seniors and people of low income. We have reporter Tammy Ayer, who's done a lot of reporting on what's been happening with missing and murdered Indigenous women and people, and what's been happening at Fort Simcoe State Historic Park, where there was an Indian boarding school that operated for many years. So that's another example. That reporting takes a lot of time and effort, and it takes somebody with a lot of experience, which Tammy has. And then just another example is the reporting that Joel did on our regional airport. So I said I would talk about some good things that are happening. So just last week, we had a Murrow Fellow start in the Yakima newsroom. He was one of the first 6 in the state to start. So this is a state program. It was funded by the state legislature to place reporters around the state. And this is the very first time we've done that in Washington. It is modeled after a program that was in operation and is in operation in California. So Queston, right here, just started. He's going to be covering lower valley communities. He's going to be covering irrigation and the drought. We know we're going to have to do a lot of drought coverage this year. He's going to cover wildfires and probably everything else. Today he had a story about the Sunnyside School District facing a possible lawsuit from the ACLU over voter districts. So he got right to work. Larissa is in the Tri-Cities. She'll be working at the Tri-City Herald. And Renee is in Wenatchee. She is working with both Northwest Public Broadcasting and the Wenatchee World. So that's a good thing. They're going to be placing, so this is the first 6, they're going to be placing 10 more people. The program is run through WSU. This is going to meet a critical need. We've had 2 Report for America reporters in our newsroom. Santiago Ochoa has been covering healthcare, and Jasper Kenzo-Sundin has been covering city government and lower valley communities. They are both leaving at the end of May. So Queston's arrival is really important. And the other project that we've been involved with that I want to talk about is a program called Advancing Democracy. And this is of interest, especially I know for the League and its election programs. So this is through Solutions Journalism Network, and it's through Trusting News. We did some work with Trusting News in 2020, and I think you can go to the next slide. We're one of a number of newsrooms around the country. Go back one.
Sorry.
One of a number of newsrooms around the country that are participating in this. And the goal is to make the election coverage less focused on candidates and more focused on the community and the issues that they find to be important. So it's going to change our coverage a little bit this year, and then now you can go to the next slide. And it already has actually changed our coverage a little bit. So we have a survey that's up on our website right now asking people what they think about our coverage. We are also going to do a better job, I hope, of explaining why we are covering things the way we are and how we are approaching the election. So you can look at our mission statement and some questions here. We've sent that out to our readers. It's also on our website. And then maybe an example of this is this story we did last week where we broke down the redistricting changes that have been now cleared by the courts to be in effect this year. It has huge effects on the Yakima Valley and who is going to elect, or who will be representing us in the state legislature. We were getting questions from readers, and we wanted to make sure we answered them. So I mean, it's more of a two-way street in terms of making sure we're getting people the information they need to make decisions on the ballot. And just another couple of examples of some of the stories that we've done that take a lot of work and take reporters who've been there for a time to be able to dig in on the reporting. This is an example of one of the affordable housing stories we did. And then Tammy's been following one of our MMIW cases on the reservation. And this was very big news, the fact that they had arrests in that case. And it took, hours of Tammy being at vigils, talking to family members, and continuing to write stories about it to keep it in front of people's eyes. And here's an example of one of the stories she did on Fort Simcoe. We had a story over the weekend. I don't know if people saw that. She spent months on the story. It was a look at the history, which is not well-known history, of the Paiute, the northern Paiute, who were put on a forced march in 1879 from Camp Harney in Oregon. They were forced to the Yakima Reservation to Fort Simcoe. It is not history that's well-known. It ties into some of the historical reckoning that needs to take place at Fort Simcoe. So again, examples of stories that you're not going to find unless you have a local newspaper in your community. And to do that, we need subscription. We need people to continue to subscribe. And a couple of the examples that I've given you today are supported by grant funding, nonprofit groups. We have outside funding to support El Sol de Yakima, which provides Spanish language reporting. My colleague on that is Gloria Ibanez. She does a great job, and we work really collaboratively with her. We have grant funding to help support some of Tammy's work. We have Report for America. We will not have a replacement for them right away. We'll try to apply again. Report for America only had one placement in the Northwest this year, and that was with Investigate West. We were lucky to get a Murrow Fellow. So that's the state of things, and I'll turn things over to you.
Okay. Can people hear me if I don't use this, or do I need to use it?
Use it.
Okay.
You could actually just hold it if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, is that better?
Yes.
Okay. I actually couldn't have said a lot of things better than Joanna said as far as the state of the journalism and where we're at. Is that better? Okay, just kind of tell me if I go back and forth.
Thank you.
As you know, I started back in May 1st of 2023 with the Daily Record. When I started, there was not a lot of local journalists at the Daily Record, so I've really had to rebuild the Daily Record into what it is today. But just to give you, we're a smaller newspaper than the Yakima Herald. They're part of the Seattle Times, and we are owned by Adams Publishing. Mark Adams he owns newspapers across the country, but I still feel that the Daily Record is local because we cover local. And I don't know if you've noticed lately that we've brought local back into the Daily Record, that we have a partnership with the Yakima Herald, and we try and use only, like, if we don't have local to Ellensburg and Kittitas, we try and use regional local news. I'm getting off track here, so I'm going to go here. One thing I wanted to state that Joanna didn't state is sometime around 1983, Knight Ridder designed one of the first systems to send electronic news directly to readers, giving customers access to stories before they hit the paper, hit their doorstep the next morning. But little did they know what a mistake that would be, because once you give something out for free, you can't get it back. And so we've really struggled with that as a newspaper industry, trying to figure out, when you read something on the internet, something that the Daily Record has written or something that the Yakima, someone has paid a journalist to write that story. So it's just trying to, I get a lot of calls about the paywall that we have, why do you have to pay for the news? Like we post something on Facebook and a story and then they click on it, and I get calls on why do I have to, why do you put it on Facebook? Well, subscribe and you can read the story. So that's kind of like my thing too, that Joanna has said, is that subscription is down. One other thing that I wanted to talk about that Joanna kind of touched on is that readers are turning to the internet, social media, trying to get their news. But it's kind of going to the fake news and why local news is more important, and why newspapers in the news desert, I guess, is what I was kind of trying to talk about with what Joanna said, is that there's a lot of newspapers out there that have dwindled down and they don't have coverage. We do a really good job, I think we do a good job of covering City Council in Ellensburg. We also have Kittitas, the city of Kittitas. We also have the city of Clayellum and the city of Roslyn and the county. So 10 years ago, we used to have, I don't know, maybe Mike can tell me this, we used to have at least 10 people in the newsroom. An editor, a managing editor, 4 news reporters, designers. Today I have an editor and 2 reporters, and I have a shared design desk that I have with other newspapers that we design the newspaper with. So we really rely on our partnerships with like the Yakima Herald and with other local newspapers to get the regional news out there. And our people try and really cover the basic Kittitas County. There's another fact. According to the latest available data, the average person spends about 6 hours a day on screens consuming digital media. Journalism has faced multiple disruptions over the years, from online marketplaces replacing classified sections for far-off companies focusing more on the bottom line than on reporting, and social media is spreading news faster than ever before. But the need for quality journalism to hold leaders accountable is as important as ever. Community newspapers, like the Daily Record, play an important plan in shaping the communities. I already talked about the shrinking of the newsroom. So I guess I want to talk about if we didn't have a local newspaper like the Daily Record, we wouldn't be covering the city hall, and readers wouldn't know about what was happening. The League of Women Voters couldn't get their word out. So we try and partner as much with the local governments, as well as sometimes they don't like us because, but we do try and cover as much as we can locally. I guess that's like, I kind of wanted to leave it open for questions. That I think Joanna can stand up, and if you guys wanted to ask us questions, we're open for questions.
Well, let's thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm all passed out because I just had like a little head cold, but I'm plowing through it, so I'm glad I was able to be here. But do you have questions for us?
2.
Okay.
First, I want to start with the tribute part. other than the free lunch. And it's not like in Hunger Games, but I wanted to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being open-minded enough and courageous enough to have a different perspective than what we had seen before with both papers, and particularly in your reporting, Anna, with the community, county news, county council, and so on. I have been so impressed with that. And Joanne, also with your focus on the county in general and the larger issues that we've tried to cover through programs this year, like water resource management and other very important ones. So there's that. And that's not a question, I'm sorry, but it is a comment.
No, I appreciate that. And hopefully the rural journalism, we do have a partnership, so hopefully about the water rights and the irrigation that they're going to be writing about, we'll be able to share with the Daily Record and get that in the Daily Record as well.